I have written a little short story or synopsis of their life. I've tried to just hit on some of the high points. So I think with that said, I will just begin and tell you some of the things that I have written down. Okay? Sally Gertrude Carlson was born July 7th, 1899 in Värnamo, Sweden, the third child in a family of 9. She immigrated to America, leaving Gothenburg, or Göteborg as the Swedes say, March 13th, 1915, and arriving in Galesburg on April 2nd, 1915. She was 15 and turned 16 on July 7th, 1915. She worked as a housemaid for several families. Some were good to her, and others were not. One lady that she worked for helped her learn English by showing her things in the Sears catalog. Carl Axel Hugo Johnson was born March 23rd, 1893, the second child in a family of 8. He immigrated to America around 1913. He worked as a farmhand for several families in the area. Both told how homesick they were, and Sally said she cried herself to sleep for a long time. And Hugo wanted to go back to Sweden, but needed help from his father. And his father said, "You made your bed, now you lie in it." I was told by some of the family that grandfather was a very stern man, and grandmother cried because she had no way of helping. Sally and Hugo met while Sally was recuperating from an appendectomy. She was staying with a Swedish lady who had a cafe, and upstairs she had rooms for young Swedish girls who needed a place to stay. Hugo was there, and he heard Sally calling out for a drink of water, and he took some to her. They were married on July 14th, 1917. Hugo continued to work on farms, taking care of the horses and doing farm work, and Sally worked in the homes, being a maid, a cook, or a nanny. Most of the people they worked for were nice to them, and they remained friends for many years. Margaret Elizabeth was born on April 10th, 1918. After 4 days, with clothes on and a blanket wrapped around her, she weighed 4 pounds. Carl Robert was born on September 10th, 1920. He weighed 9 pounds. During the 1929 Depression time, my mother, Sally, and my father, Hugo, because they lived on a farm and had food, they took in a lot of relatives and friends. Namely, Sally's 2 brothers, Ragnar and Arvid, a sister, Martha, and her husband, Reynold, and a daughter, June, who lived in the Chicago area and lost everything they had. 2 young Swedish brothers, Eskil and Martin Johansson, who had no family here, and 1 cousin, John. That's 8 extra people to cook for on a wood-burning stove. And that meant breakfast, a packed lunch when the men had jobs to go to, and a big supper. All of that, and not 1 drop of running water to cook with, to bathe in, to do laundry in, or to drink. My mother and father never had 1 drop of running water or an indoor bathroom their whole life together. After the Depression let up a bit, and Sally didn't have quite so many to cook for, the surprise of all surprises. I was born on April 1, 1934. In those days, no one talked about pregnancy, and Mother wore big dresses and aprons, so even her brothers, who still lived with him, had no idea that I was on the way. When they told people that Sally was in the hospital and had a baby girl, they all laughed and said, "Oh yeah, we know it's April Fool's Day, so we don't believe you." But the redeeming thing was that I was born on Easter Sunday. My sister was 16 years old the day I came home from the hospital, and my brother was 14. Sally and Hugo continued to live on farms. The one dream my father had was to own 80 acres. That dream never came true, and he lived his entire working life as a tenant farmer. In 1946, Hugo went back to Sweden. He had been gone 33 years. When he arrived and saw his sister, he asked her if she was his mother. In 1949, Sally went back to see her family. She went again in 1958 and maybe one more time, I don't remember. Hugo never had any of his family visit here while he was alive. His one sister came after he had died. Hugo died on December 3rd, 1954, after a farm accident. Quite a shock for all of us. He was only 61 years old. After that, Sally went to stay in Chicago with Margaret and worked as a nanny in some very nice homes in the Chicago area. By the way, she finally had running water and a bathroom. She yearned for her home back in Galesburg, so returned and worked at a bakery, and then was in the kitchen and dining room of a nursing home for many years. She lived with Pat for 16 years, then Robert for about 5 years, and ended up living her last 10 years independently in a senior citizen apartment where she always had cookies and coffee for her friends who were reunited after years of living elsewhere. She lived to see her children raised, her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and maybe even a great-great. She died on April 28, 1988. She was deeply loved and missed by all. There are hundreds of other stories that I could tell you, but felt that I just needed to touch on some of the highlights of their life. In telling you this story, I hope it gives you a feeling of respect and admiration for the strength and determination of two people who came before us and lived a simple life and left a legacy of love that we all share today.